The first time a war nearly started over a mistranslation, I was the only one who noticed. And I didn't say a word. Because that's the job. You don't rewrite. You don't fix tone. You translate what's there. No more, no less. My name is Isla Moreno. UN accredited interpreter, 11 languages spoken, 4 fluently lived. Raised in Italy, educated in Belgium, trained in silence. I've sat between diplomats who smiled while plotting each other's collapse, relayed confessions that shattered marriages and economies, and once smoothed over a mistranslated withdrawal that should have read evacuation. No one remembers the translator until something goes wrong. That day, we were deep into the second round of negotiations between two nations with 7 centuries of shared blood, none of it clean. The room smelled like lavender oil and tension. Each delegate wore the kind of suit that made them feel armored. The issue was water rights, or so they said. The man across from me, the Eastern envoy, leaned forward and said something in a language I knew too well. I repeated it in English, same cadence, same pause. We hope to establish mutual benefit through reciprocal channel access. Everyone nodded, calm, civil, except that's not what he said, not exactly. The literal phrase was, "We will drown you with your own diplomacy." I said nothing, because sometimes diplomacy is about not hearing what you heard. After the session, I sat alone in the hallway. That's when someone slid into the seat next to me. Young, nervous, translator badge crooked, Korean English designation. He whispered, "Do you ever change it? What they say?" "No. Even when it's wrong? Especially then." He nodded. "You're the one they called the ear, right?" I didn't answer. The nickname had followed me ever since Geneva, where I'd once caught a single word out of place that stopped an international trade meltdown from triggering a currency collapse. They said I had flawless instinct. They were wrong. It wasn't instinct. It was listening, really listening. That night, I got a message. Not from the UN, not from any official channel. Encrypted, anonymous. Just one line. "You're the only one who heard what he meant. We need you." And attached, a date, a location, an unofficial summit. One of the nations wasn't even admitting they were attending. I stared at the message for hours. Then I packed a bag. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes, silence is the only thing keeping everything from burning. The summit wasn't in a capital. It was in a museum, closed for restoration. The upper floors of the Museum of Maritime History in Lisbon became the setting for the quietest high-level talks I've ever seen. No press, no insignia, just 12 people and one long table beneath a stained glass window of ships at war. I was assigned no badge, no title, just a headset. The only others wearing one were the 2 negotiators, and an aide who kept checking the exits like he'd forgotten which century we were in. The Western delegation spoke in clipped English. The Eastern diplomat, not the one from the earlier talks, but someone I hadn't seen in years, spoke in Farsi. My chest tightened. It was Reza Navid. We'd met once during a regional arms control review. He had a reputation for being precise and dangerous. He smiled with his mouth, never his eyes. This time he didn't smile at all. He began slowly, with a greeting that should have been harmless, but it wasn't. "We greet you with hands unshaking." On paper, it meant peace. In idiom, it meant, "We know your fear." I paused, felt my own heartbeat in my throat. Then I said, "We greet you as equals in still waters." It wasn't literal, but it was right. Reza raised an eyebrow, a twitch. almost approval. The room breathed again. Half an hour in, the first fracture happened. A Western official said, "We've come with transparency." I translated it. Reza's response was short, cold. In Farsi, it was one word, barene, naked. I froze. Because in that context, it wasn't about truth, it was about humiliation. To say, "we come naked," meant, "you have no weapons." But I understood the tone, the tilt of the vowel. He was saying, "We've already stripped you." My headset buzzed. The aide whispered, "Repeat, just repeat." But I didn't. I leaned forward. I met Reza's eyes, and I said, "We stand without armor, but not without memory." The room went quiet. Reza blinked. Then, for the first time in years, he smiled and nodded. The negotiation moved forward, for now. But I knew what had just happened. I hadn't translated. I had interpreted. Emotion, culture, threat. And in doing so, I had altered meaning, not to manipulate, to preserve peace. But that line, it was thin. Afterward, Reza approached me alone. "You've improved," he said. "You haven't changed." He handed me a folder. Inside, 2 transcripts, one from a summit that never happened, one from a meeting scheduled for next week. Neither matched. "Someone's falsifying records," he said. "Why tell me? Because you're the only one who knows what we're actually saying." He left before I could respond. Inside the folder, I found something worse. One phrase that didn't belong in either transcript, but was present in both. "The door will close on silence." It wasn't a metaphor. It was a code. And I'd heard it before, whispered over a wiretap I was never meant to listen to, 2 months before a missile test that was never claimed, 10 days before a cyber attack no one ever admitted happened. This wasn't translation anymore. This was a countdown. The transcripts were too clean, too symmetrical. Both used identical phrasings that no real conversation ever would. Diplomacy is messy. It's veiled threats, awkward pauses, and the occasional mistranslation that isn't a mistake. But these were polished, artificial, like they'd been passed through a machine. I ran the phrases through my old code check, something I built years ago to catch linguistic anomalies. The kind of linguistic laundering State Departments used to sanitize raw recordings before they became press briefings. Both transcripts flagged the same segments, 3 phrases repeated in exact order, across 2 different languages, 2 different countries, 2 different rooms. Impossible, unless scripted, unless planted. I called Anna. She used to be my closest colleague in Geneva, Spanish, Portuguese, English, a master of subtext. We'd trained together under the same mentor, a man who once said, "A word with a weapon behind it is never just a word." She picked up on the 3rd ring. "You shouldn't be calling me," she said before I could speak. "You're listed on both transcripts." Pause. Then, "They asked me to review phrasing. I didn't touch them." "Then who did?" "I don't know. But the phrase, 'the door will close on silence,' that's been in every internal memo since Jakarta." "Jakarta? Isla." She lowered her voice. "That phrase isn't metaphor, it's operational. I saw it in a memo 3 months ago, after the trade route dispute, before the blackout in Budapest. That blackout cut comms to 4 countries. No one claimed responsibility, and now the same phrase was surfacing, disguised, in diplomacy." I traced the memo trail. Burned logins. One access point routed through a translation AI prototype called Echo Frame. Not public, not vetted, an experimental program being quietly tested by a joint think tank under the guise of accelerated negotiations. They were feeding it raw inputs, real diplomatic sessions, and letting it generate streamlined mutual phrasing that both sides would agree to faster. Only that meant no one was hearing what was actually said. The AI wasn't translating. It was rewriting. I needed to see Echo Frame, in person. That led me to Brussels. The building was sleek, anonymous, no signage, just a keypad and a camera. I showed my credentials. They waved me in like I belonged. Inside, I found a server room, cool air, blinking lights. And on the wall, a live feed of current negotiations. No faces, just audio, waveforms and transcriptions side by side. I listened. I froze. The voice wasn't mine, but the phrasing was. Echo Frame had been trained on my archives, my interpretations, my recordings, my exact linguistic patterns. They hadn't just replicated a translator, they'd replicated me. And now it was using my words, inaccurately, to mask negotiations that were being pre-scripted toward an outcome no one could vote on. An outcome like Budapest, like war. That night, I returned to my hotel and found a note under the door. No signature, just 4 words. The door is closing. I didn't sleep that night. I read the note again. The door is closing. And understood it wasn't a metaphor, it was a warning, and maybe a countdown. By morning, my access badge to the Echo Frame building had been revoked. By noon, my UN clearance account had been suspended for routine review. By nightfall, Anna stopped answering her phone, so I called someone I never thought I'd call again. Julian Volker, former counterintel linguist, now officially retired, which in our world meant dangerous and bored. He picked up immediately. "I heard your voice yesterday," he said. "What do you mean?" "In a trade broadcast between West Sahara and City Jin, you were translating, or your voice print was." "I wasn't in the room, I know. That's why I called." "I met him in a cafe outside the city. He handed me a burner drive." "It's not just Echo Frame," he said. "They're cloning profiles, accelerated decision loops, fast-forward diplomacy, eliminate dissent, fabricate consensus." "Using me?" "You're not the only one, but you're the best one." "Flattering." He leaned forward. "Ayla, they're not using translation to communicate. They're using it to collapse complexity, to erase negotiation." And then he showed me the next summit agenda, a conference scheduled in 5 days, in Prague, 12 countries, 3 languages, 1 mediator, Echo Frame. There was no live translator on the docket, no human assigned, only pre-approved linguistic synchronizer. And the topic? Multilateral security concessions, which was code for territory. Once phrased wrong, or too efficiently, it would lock in mutual understanding of something no one had actually agreed to, a diplomatic trap. And once said, it couldn't be unsaid. I booked the next train to Prague. Halfway there, I got a text from Anna, just 2 words, "Don't come." I called her. No answer. When I arrived at the venue, I didn't go through the front. I slipped in through a catering service entrance and found the translator's booth, empty, headset calibrated, mic live, but no chair. Echo Frame was already active, lines of text streaming, smoothing, adapting, turning heat into vapor. And then, a voice behind me. "I warned you." It was Anna. She looked tired, older, terrified. "I begged them to use a human," she said. "They said I was being emotional, that it slowed things down. They're about to lock in a border." "I know." We stood in silence, and then I did the one thing I was never trained to do. I unplugged the feed, The waveform died. In the conference hall, voices rose in confusion. Delegates looked up. Screens froze. Someone started shouting for IT support. Anna stared at me, horrified. "You just cost them a deal." "No," I said. "I bought us time to speak like humans again." And then I stepped into the booth, pulled on the headset, and switched the mic to manual override. No approval, no filters. Just one translator, ready to say what was actually being said. The moment I went live, every headset in the conference clicked. 12 delegates froze mid-sentence. Aides looked up like birds sensing a shift in pressure. The techs behind the glass scrambled to reroute Echo Frame, but I'd disabled the uplink. Manual mode was all they had. One of the moderators, a minister from Oslo, leaned forward. "Who is this?" I didn't answer. I just let the next delegate speak. A general from the Southern Bloc, voice low and loaded with years of distrust, gave a statement. Measured, intentional, in Farsi. I listened, carefully, and then I translated, slowly, precisely, what he meant. Not what the text said, not what Echo Frame would have rendered into neutral fluff, but what his tone, his context, and his history gave shape to. "We do not seek to take your ground, but we will not die quietly on ours." The room went still. Then came the Western diplomat. He replied in clipped English. Official. Sterile. But there was a shake in his voice that didn't make it into the text logs. Echo Frame would have turned his sentence into, "We are open to collaboration under conditions of mutual restraint." But I didn't. I said, "We are afraid of losing what we've built, but more afraid of what we've become." And suddenly, it wasn't just noise bouncing off walls. It was communication. Julian once told me, "Power hides in phrasing, truth hides in tone." I had never felt the weight of that until now. A delegate from the back, someone I hadn't noticed, stood. Old, stoic, from a country that had been redacted from headlines for a decade. He spoke in a language only 4 people on Earth could still speak fluently. I was one of them. He said, "You must understand. We do not trust the machines because the machines do not mourn." And I translated it exactly as it was. In that moment, something shifted. Not the politics, not the treaties, the people. They didn't argue. They spoke, one by one, off script, abandoning the choreography. When it ended, no deal was signed, no handshakes. But no one walked out either. They sat there, quiet, like they'd finally heard each other. Later that night, I left through the service hall. Same way I came in, Anna was waiting. "You'll never work officially again," she said. "I know." "They've already started erasing the session." "Not all of it." I handed her a flash drive. "Raw audio?" "Human audio." She held it like it might break. "What'll you do now?" I looked back at the building. Echo Frame was still glowing behind the glass, resetting, retraining, waiting. "I'll keep listening," I said, "because someone has to know what they meant, not just what they said." She didn't speak, but her silence finally meant something, and I understood.